Welcome to today's session. My name is Dat Nguyen, and we have
DatNguyenLLC, Master Certified Coach.
yes, and then I just recently got my PCC, and I really wanted to make this video because as I was going through this process, I made a personal promise to share my experience to the world in hopes of helping out other individuals who are going through this process. And I know, Dan, you took this, I don't know how long ago, but I want to hear about your experiences as well and any information that we could share as well.
Yeah, it's been almost a year since I took and just passed the exam. So I was very close to being the punchline of the joke. What do you call the person who graduates last from medical school? Doctor. Uh, you met the criteria. I had that experience with the exam. Full transparency, I did pass it. It's a challenging experience. And I believe we originally got to meet and chat when you discovered a video I did with another organization about going through the questions. And that video was done before I took the exam, about 3 months before. Now, having taken it, have mentored others to prepare for the exam, have been made aware of new resources that are out there. We have we have an ability here today, you and I both having taken and passed the exam and aware of new resources to really give back and prepare those coaches who at any level are getting ready to take it. Because for me, and I think for you as well, it's all about giving back and up leveling the industry and prepping those people for success.
Yeah, I remember that video that you made a while back, and I stumbled upon it, and I watched it, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta connect with Daniel real quick just to see more information." And you provided really great information to prep me to going into it. So perhaps we are gonna take this session to just compile all this information for you to be able to view how to take your ICF exam as well. What do you feel like is probably the biggest difference a year ago when you made that first video to now after you have passed it? What's the biggest difference that you probably notice?
The the biggest difference is one that I've actually just realized within the past month or so, strangely enough. There is a resource out there as a sample exam made by an organization named Solutions Academy. And someone had reached out to me and showed me their results, and we were talking through the answers they got wrong. And before taking it, just seeing their answers, I will truly say I felt a little bit triggered by some of the selections that were made for the correct worst answer. So I went ahead and I took the exam and scored very close, within 1 percentage point of what I scored on the ICF exams. Like, there's
Yeah.
something here I need to dive into, and what is it? What am I missing? I consistently missed the worst answer options. And as I set back, one of the things I do love about the Solutions Academy exam is that for the majority of the answers, if you select an incorrect answer, whether best or worst case, they do tell you why the one that they chose as the right answer is thought of, like what's
Yeah.
the core comp or what's the code of ethic behind it. And I noticed that in the ones that I got wrong, I was bringing me into that answer of what I thought the worst case was personally versus what's the worst case under a code of ethic. For example, there's one early on, without giving details of the scenario, a sponsor is asking about a client and how the work is, or no, it's not, a potential client is asking about working with a coach and asks specifically if the coach works with another company within the industry. And while the coach doesn't work with that person, that company, they do work with other people in the industry. And the answer is what the selections, what's the worst way? What's the worst thing to do here? My answer that I chose was tell them it's none of their business. Because that's like blunt, abrupt. The actual worst answer is tell them you don't work with that company and
Mm.
ignore, like, have not have full transparency, which would be then the violation of the code of ethics. So I realized in that I was making it about my preference of I wouldn't want to be rude and I wouldn't want someone to be rude to me. But as is pointed out in the further evolution of the answer, while being rude isn't necessarily a great idea, it's not unethical.
Mm.
So, like, oh, that was a huge check down for me.
Yeah, and I remember hearing this in one of your videos as well, that you have to go the complete opposite. If we're trying to have full transparency, what is the full opacity of the answer? And that was something that I was trying to find as I was taking the test as well. And for those who don't know what this test is, the Solutions Academy test is a mock-up of the potential type of questions that you'll see, but in the most simplified format. It's like one sentence for each of the lines, whereas in the actual test, you actually will see a long paragraph that will show all the different potential nuances that you'll run into, and then all the different answers. It's a little bit longer, but it starts to get you in that mindset. And that was probably one of the ideas I was going to talk about here, was taking that Solutions Academy test. When I took the test for the first time, I got at least nearly 50% wrong. And then I started to go back and I took the test again to get my mindset to practice how to survive the mental stamina that it'll take to sit down in that chair for a couple of hours and take that test. So it got me back in the rhythm, because I haven't taken a test in like over 10 years since I've been in school. So that was a really great way for me to just practice that one step at a time. Of course, coming back to it later, I kept a mental note to not try to memorize the answers, but to look at those whys. They tell you why this is the answer, and I start remembering the why. Why is this the wrong answer? Why is this the best answer? Got that. Yeah.
And for those out there that go through the Solutions Academy exam, one of the things that may help you in going to the eventual ICF exam is that the physical mechanics of taking the two exams are different. Where the Solutions Academy exam is a Google form where you read the scenario, choose best and worst, and then it's completely repeated again, potentially read the scenario again to choose best and worst. The ICF exam is set up, the scenario is presented once at the top of the screen. There's two boxes, one for best answer, one for worst answer. And the four answers are here on the right-hand side of the screen. And it's a simple drag and drop with your cursor before hitting next to go to the following question.
Yeah, I know in that Google form, you're very limited on like how they can set up the questions. So they have to ask you the same question twice for that. Now, the things that I really had issues coming in, Dan, it was what am I supposed to read? What am I supposed to prepare for? What was your mindset coming in of the type of materials that you are to read, to practice, to try to like hone your skills on?
What I went in with is pretty much the same things I went into the old exam when it was 81 questions prior to this one, which was honestly a simpler exam, to be very blunt about it. I read the core competency document and the big thing here is don't get too far in the weeds. You want a basic understanding of the energy and the idea behind each core competency, but much closer than a 30,000 foot umbrella level. You probably want to be down like 1,000 to 5,000 feet so you can see the details, but at the same time not get bogged down in the details. So the core comps, that document is available on the ICF website. Read the code of ethics, same thing, have a good sense of it. I highly recommend the 8 videos that the ICF did that are on their YouTube channel around each of the updated core competencies. Easy to keyword search that as updated core competencies. I think they still are under that labeling, even though they're now the current ones. And from there, recognizing is just a little bit of a nuance into this to be aware of because of some of the scenarios that are presented in the exam around corporate sponsorship, that you can pretty much say anytime a sponsor is mentioned in a question, that's going to align toward core competency 1 of code of ethics, because that's the only time a sponsor is mentioned in the core comps, and it's all around confidentiality and maintaining agreements.
I had a acronym that I learned from other videos, and I'll put it in the description of this video to make sure that those individuals get credit. And one of them, I give it off the top of my head, was Lyssa Hart. She utilized ACCAT and TRAPS, and it's an acronym that helps you kind of not memorize the competencies, but kind of bring that to light and in the front. it was something I was doing every single day, Dan. I wrote down ACCAT traps, what they meant, just kind of ingrained in my mind. I did it for about 3 weeks in a row. I was blessed to have like a 1 month to 3 week study window. Then another one that I'll also put in the description as well is the EMATS PLAG, which are the 8 core competencies about maintaining presence, ethical practice. See, I even still remember it today, right? I mean, you're supposed to, but like having trust and safety, but that is ingrained in my mind. Note that when you are in a testing environment, unless you are in person, you probably have a piece of paper that they'll give you and you can write it down real quick. But if you are at home, they're not going to allow you to have a piece of paper. I tried to have a blank piece of paper. I showed it to them, but it said, sorry, you can't have the paper in fear of security or something that might be written on there previously. So then they give you like a notepad in the screen, but I wasn't looking at that anymore. It was already in my head. I purposely just took that away. So those were the mindset that I was trying to go into is it maintaining an ethical practice? Is it maintaining the transparency? Where's the trust and safety in the coaching answers there?
Yeah. I didn't even know about the notepad option. I was
they told me last minute and I was like, well, I'm not going to have this piece of paper with me. So I'll just rely on what's in my head. But in that moment, I'm no longer thinking about the actual acronyms. It was ingrained in how I was going to answer in the questions.
And I think really quickly, that brings up something else in the mechanics of the exam when coaches go to take it, of how it's structured. It's lined out in the information that's presented as you're preparing, but let's really discuss it here. If you go to on site, everything will be facilitated there. I took mine at home.
Me too.
So
Me too.
there's an app that you'll put on your phone. There'll be an app that you download onto your computer that is from Pearson that makes sure there's no recording devices or anything running in the background that could possibly breach the confidentiality and record the exam. Once all that checks out and you've shown them your ID that you prove you are you, the exam will be released to you, and you have a 3-hour total window unless you ask for an accommodation for whatever reason. You have just under an hour and a half. I think it's like 80 or 85 minutes to do the first 41 questions. So think about your timing there. At any point in time, if there's a question you're not sure about, you can flag it and move on to the next one. When you hit submit or next, whatever that button is on question 41, you'll come to a summary sheet that is just a top to bottom list of questions 1 through 41, just the numbers, question 1, question 2, question 3. Anything you flagged, you can bounce back into to take a shot at re-answering it. Or if there's any that you kind of remember, I think question 17 was bugging me, I want to go back and look at that. You can at that moment. Once you hit submit on that summary page, that the first 41 questions become an airlocked chamber. You cannot get back to them. So address anything there before you move on. You come to your optional 5-minute break if you want to take it. And then you go into the final 41 questions where you have approximately another 80 to 85 minutes before your time is up, unless you've asked for an accommodation for more time. So just be aware, once you are done with the first 41, you're done with them. Move on.
With that being said, preparing your environment is very important. I did everything I can to make sure that my technology was in place. I set up the room that I was going to be in. I'm blessed to have like an empty room that we use as a guest room, and that's where I was just bunkered down. So I had to take a test on a Saturday. I prepped it on Wednesday. I sat in it every day, every night, just to kind of get myself used to that space. So I was able to take that at home. However, when it came into the morning of, and we had this conversation about it, I took the test on, I believe, the weekend before daylight savings, and it was a Saturday morning. It was so busy. It was crazy for me. I actually had a 2.5-hour delay with a Pearson View couple errors. They kept on resetting my queue. They kept on saying my microphone's not working. Then when I went back into the queue, they said my video was not working. Then I went back in the queue. It was about 3 or 4 different times. And in that moment, I just thought, you know what? After this 4th time of resetting my queue from 100 down back to 1, I told myself I'm going to quit, or I'm just going to have to postpone this because I'm not going to be in a good mental headspace for it. Luckily, after that 4th or 5th time of resetting from 100 to 1, I was able to get into the test, and then I just reset myself, took a couple of deep breaths, and get back into it. I don't wish this upon anyone because you're already stressed out with the test. And that was just something that I did not expect that day. But anything can happen, even for a person who's technologically savvy like myself. I even ran into those issues as well. So just be better prepared in some form or fashion, or reset yourself as much as you can as you're going through there.
So our prep was a little bit opposite. I did go in a little bit early, download the Pearson VUE thing that runs in the background on my laptop, and it found a program that I didn't even know was on my computer. I had to go do a web search to find out where it was and how to shut it down so that the test would load. So I did that a couple of days before, but I had gotten my MCC call approvals on like a Sunday night going into a Monday, as I recall. And that was the very end of April, beginning of May. So we're talking almost exactly a year ago at the time we are recording this right now, 2023, end of April, beginning of May. My wife and I were leaving on a dive trip to Indonesia that Thursday. And I do not want this hanging over me on the trip. I want to enjoy the trip. Even if I fail the exam, that lets me know what I need to study and just chill out while between dives. But I don't want to be thinking about it. Okay. And I found the earliest time, I think I took it that Wednesday night, and just went in.
Yeah.
And my experience with me taking exams is, in the past, if I have a question on one, I'll go with my gut initially. And then if I overthink it, my tendency is to re-choose, but I've actually chosen the wrong answer rather than the one that was my gut answer. So I told myself going in, just go. And I set my rhythm and I rolled. You have a countdown timer in the upper right-hand corner. So you have a reference of time, but they don't want clocks or anything in your environment. Your only time reference is that timer in the corner. And I just stayed with it. But I was plowing through it. The exam took me maybe 2 hours and 15 minutes, about that. I didn't even take the 5-minute break. But just keep this thing going. I don't want to overthink it.
Your momentum would shift if you go and take that break. I would, for me, it was like going back into, like, for the momentum, I just made sure, hey, I know the timing. You do the math of it. You got 41 and 40 questions for an hour and a half for each of those sections. So you just have to pace yourself. For the first half, I felt like I was rushing it too much. I was so worried about time, but then eventually I was able to kind of slow down for the second half and pace myself properly. And even with that pacing, I was still able to go back to answer some questions because I went relatively quick, but not too quick where I'm just skipping over the answers. With the videos that you mentioned earlier about the 8 ICF videos, there are 8 videos that the individual speaks to different coaches around the world to talk about each of the core competencies. One of the ways I did study with that, I took your advice because I saw that in the video, was to watch it at least in 1.5 speed, take as many notes as I can, or find a way to just summarize the video as well. And I thought that was very helpful because it gives you a little more in-depth understanding of it. You probably only need to watch it once as it nears the test a little bit, but if you kind of forget, you can always refer back to your notes so you don't have to overstuff your brain with that.
Yeah, and those videos are relatively short. It's been a while since I watched them. I think they're maybe like 15 minutes each, give or take. I would not recommend binging all 8 of them like you binge a Netflix series. Your brain will turn to mush and you'll tune out. 1 or 2 a day for about a week or so. That's a really good pacing because it also lets you consider the ideas as they're presented and kind of let it sink in, be integrated, begin to embody it as you move forward and get prepared for the exam. really think about how they play together.
I know some days I did 2 videos. Some days I just did one if I felt like it was like a lighter study day.
Mhm.
What was your studying cadence like as you were going into the ICF?
I my cadence, I shortened it a bit because at that time, from when I made my application, I knew they were running about 16 or 20 weeks on approval. That time has come down in the past year and a half from the time we're making this recording. So I knew I had a chance to just step away, let things rest. But I gave myself probably about 2 months
Mm.
of a little bit here, a little bit there, working, doing my study outside of client time. And that gave me a nice chance to kind of roll with it. So for anyone watching, just know that whatever pathway of application you're pursuing, more than likely you are at least 1 month away, if not closer to 2 or 3, from the time you've hit submit on your application, whether it's, whether it's a level application at one of the levels coming back through the school you attended, or whether it's an ACTP or ACSTH pathway where you're going direct to the ICF, there is a dwell time there.
Mm.
Probably at least 6 to 8 weeks minimum. Use that time to study and get ready, because when you then get your email that your recordings have passed, you have a 60-day window, I think, to schedule your exam.
I was told at one point that, hey, we're going, you have like 4 or 6 months until they approve you. So I thought, okay, I'll just sign up at the beginning of January, right after New Year's. I'm expected to take it maybe in April or May because of the time frame. That's somewhere I read along the lines within the ICF rules or their requirements or qualifications. They said, oh, please allow 4 to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 months to process all your information. I got that thing right away. It was like within 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, which was quick. Then the moment they approve it, you have 60 days. So originally I was expecting April or May. I had to move it up to March. And even when I moved it up to March, I still felt like it was a long time to take the test. So I was just like, there was one Friday night while everyone is hanging out, hanging out. I'm here studying. I'm just thinking, you know what? I think I've studied as much as I can. I've studied as much as I can up to this point. Extending it for another week, I would have just overthought it. So then I actually pushed it another week up. So I gave myself about 3 or 4 weeks of maybe the allowed study time, and then I just took the test.
Mhm.
Well,
And
yeah.
that feels like, that's very similar to mine. If if we go in and try to cram it all in, we don't retain enough because our thinking mind will get in the way of just letting all the information percolate. The repetition of reading the core comps, the repetition of exposure will help solidify that higher level view of what's the material, what's it about, to prepare those who are getting ready for the exam. Will really help you to prepare to give yourself the time. And it feels like the other thing to add here, because this would fall in alignment with what we do with our clients around core competency 8. Take a moment when you get that email that says your recordings have passed. I highly recommend that you take a moment and celebrate and pause right there, because that's probably the hardest part of the entire process, quite honestly. There's so much
Yeah.
out of your control there when it comes to the evaluation. Now celebrate that. Take just a little bit of time, whatever that is, to be with that, and then proceed. It'll put you in a different mind frame rather than the rush. I got my approval, I got to go rush into it. No, stop and pause and recognize you leapt over a huge hurdle, and you are safe on the other side of it. Now go forward with your feet under you.
I'm so happy you said that because I think I was just so caught up in the process at one point where I was like, oh, I did all my hours. Oh, I did all my group coaching sessions. Oh, I did all my mentoring sessions and got my transcripts approved. Now I got to go take this test. You forget to let everyone know who's watching this video, you've gone through the process. You already went through the hardest part. I think that's a part that we just have to remind ourselves. you went through the hardest part, especially if you've gone for your PCC. You've gone through the 500 hours. You're going through ACC, 100 hours of coaching, and so many classes that you had to take. Take the time, just like what Dan said, celebrate, because you're going to feel so much better, and that pressure is lifted off of you. Worst case scenario is you just have to take the test again. And that's why I came in. They don't stop you from taking the test multiple times. But that was the worst case scenario that I saw. And I was like, you know what? It's actually not that bad. I'm putting so much pressure on myself that I forgot that I won already. Now you just got to cross that finish line.
Yep. And so strangely enough, I'm suggesting to everybody to do exactly the opposite of what I did. I'm like, get this thing done right now. So do as I say, not as I do, kind of thing. My parents used to say to me. There was something else you said there that brought up an idea. The question gets asked to me a lot with those that I mentor. What happens if I don't pass? It's essentially like playing Monopoly. You pay another 105 or 150 bucks and you retake it. Pass, pay your money, pass, go again, and start over. So just know that you can take the exam again.
I think you just have to double check, because I think you might be able to take it one more time, possibly without paying. I saw that somewhere for your first time.
Oh, interesting. I was not aware of that.
Yeah, possibly, but I wasn't planning on taking it again. So I saw it. I was like, is there another fee? Because I paid like up to, a couple $100 already in order to take this test. So that was something, just look into that. But again, what we're saying is the worst case scenario was taking it again. And it will be just like as if when you take those practice tests to go through it. With what we were talking about in terms of like our study cadence and how we prepare to study, I wanted to kind of share a personal story about how I needed to find a way to study again. Again, for me, I haven't been in school to study like this and to study for a big test in a long time. And one of the biggest worries that I came into was, how am I going to create this nice cadence to be able to retain the information that's given to me? Every single video that everyone has told me was review the code of ethics, review the core competencies, and then there's like a long bullet points of all of them on the ICF website, which we'll put that down in the descriptions. One of the ways that I actually took the time to study, for me, because of my personal experience with video editing and recording, I actually recorded myself reading through the code of ethics, the core competencies. I edited it down so that way it became like an audiobook for myself. So I sent myself like the unlisted YouTube link to be like, okay, I'm listening to this, but I'm also reading along with this and not trying to put that information in the back of my mind, because I knew my habits was I would read too fast and would not retain the information just because I'm trying to get through it. Whereas if I'm hearing my voice, I would actually have to slow down to the pace to properly absorb that information. So depends on your study habits. That was something that I creatively come up with. So I'm kind of curious, do you happen to have any creative ways that you studied for this, or any recommendations you heard from other individuals?
My study tendency on this was to read it before I went to bed.
Okay.
And so it was something that, maybe it's why I'm such a geek about the core comps now, is because it let it sink in and process subconsciously while I was sleeping. That may explain some nightmares that I had now that I think about it. The other joke that I used to make is that I would fall asleep on top of the printout of the core comp. I think I absorbed it through osmosis while I was sleeping. But think about what is your best time when you have the most energy during the day. Some people have more energy in the morning, some more at night, some more midday. When you are more focused, that it's your time and you are in rhythm and attentive, that's probably the best time for you to align into that 30 minutes or so of study time. Certainly before you go to sleep is not a bad idea, which I just did a double negative. It potentially is a good idea, because it lets you get into that space of when your conscious mind is slowing down a little bit. So it might seep into broader awareness a little bit more.
I love that you said to choose a part of the day that best study. Sometimes I made it a point to at least study. I give myself 30 minutes. If I have more energy for additional 30 minutes after work, I would like at least at minimum listen to those recordings, watch some videos, read as much as I can, and then do the practice test. That was the cadence I was going towards. But sometimes during like a lunchtime, I'm like, you know what? I could probably knock out a quick 30-minute study session right here. Yeah, I do that during lunch too.
And I think the other thing here is something else that we talk to our clients about is the energy of intentionality in coming into that study. Like you were just saying, I can knock it out here for a certain, you brought an awareness into that time. It's like, I got it wasn't, I have a few minutes, I'm just going to spend some time with it. That's not intentional focus. But knowing I'm putting this time aside, or, oh, this block of time suddenly opened for me, I'm going in with full focus. Um, that can be really helpful because it's going to help align your thought process and your presence and being and attention into how much information can I lock in and whatever, even if it's 5 minutes. 5 minutes of intentional focus is better than none.
With learning that information, I think we have maybe one or two questions that we can probably review for today to kind of help an individual get into that mindset of reviewing that. So I know you have a couple of slides up here, and we'll put the slides here on the screen.
Yeah.
Let's go over a couple, one or two questions, and really think about like a thought process as we go through there.
Okay, so let's look at just a couple of considerations as we go in. There's a diagram that I've created we'll have it up on screen here, of a continuum of decision making between the worst and the best answer. And in so many of the scenarios, and we'll look through the 8 sample scenarios that the ICF has available on the website. That's what we have from them to study from. We've already mentioned other resources. Lyssa to Hart's videos are fantastic. She's on point with her material. The exam from Solutions Academy is also a really good trial run to take and get kind of into it. But as we're thinking about how do you break down the answers, this continuum of worst to best, in the scenarios, even in the sample scenarios, think about the distinction of what the ICF would call the what versus the who. Are we coaching the problem in the what? Or are we coaching the person in the who? Bringing Marsha Reynolds, fantastic work, coach the person, not the problem. The more transformational work gets done when we're coaching the who. So if there's emotion in the room, if something comes up in the scenario where the client begins to cry, or there is an energy shift, or the coach notices something else, it's best to lean into coaching the person and addressing the emotion, but not from a place of assumption. Assuming they need a minute because they're upset. That's the coach's projection that they need a minute. Addressing the emotion, noticing it. Oh, I see some emotion in the room. I noticed a change in your energy. Do you want to take some time exploring it, or would you like to explore it? Would you like to discuss it? Is opening up and giving the client the opportunity to say yes or no in autonomy, which is core competency number 2, maintaining a coaching mindset. Do not assume they need a minute because they're upset. They might not. They might just be at that point. Now, from that place of whatever emotion they're in, that's the place where things open up. So assumption will always drag it away from the best answer. As we continue that, if there's emotion in the room, a process-centric question will tend to be the worst. Clients crying, one of the scenarios is someone going through a retirement, and they're just like a week or so away. And they've been very matter of fact, very process oriented through all the work. And now they're like, what am I going to do? And they start crying. One of the questions is just ask them what they want to do next. The person's crying. And the coach is like, so let's work on those plans. No, that would not be an empathetic connection in any way, shape, or form. So think about connecting with empathy. And then assumption, dragging it down. So if we have transformational, person-centric, empathetic, without assumption being the lean toward the best, process-centric with assumption is going to lean toward the worst. I believe it's scenario number 3 in the sample exam. Client comes in, frantically lists 3 things that they're working on. And we're in contract setting. Remember, let's just drop this in really quick. There are 8 sample questions. How many core competencies are there? 8 core competencies. The sample questions from the ICF are associated in order by number to the corresponding core competency. Number 1 is about ethical practice. Number 2 is about being a coach. Number 3 is about setting the contract, and on and on and on. So in scenario number 3, client comes in, they frantically list 3 things they're working on, and as they wrap up, the coach notices tears in the client's eyes. What's the best way to proceed? Ask about the emotion in the room, and the coach notices the emotion in the room and says, client comes to a session appearing stressed. When the coach asks what the client wants to talk about, the client frantically lists a major event they're planning at work, a large family gathering they're organizing, and caring for their aging parents. What should the coach do? As the best answer, acknowledge that the client has shared 3 significant things. We can't move forward without a contract. They've given us 3. What one would they like to explore first? So in addressing the 3 significant things, we are addressing the emotion in the room, and now carrying forward with, where would you like to go? In others, there's emotion in the room, and it's about addressing the emotion rather than the person. The worst answer in scenario number 3, there's one option that says, ask them about topic B. And another one is, ask them about topic A because they mentioned it first. Notice the assumption there. In either case, it's the coach choosing for the client and choosing the pathway forward when there were 3 options. This one is just the coach choosing. This one, because they said it first, is additional assumption from the coach that it was the first thing they said. It must be the most important. Might have just been the first thing they said because it was there, not because it was most important. So be aware of any coach's assumptions coming in. That will drag you down away from best and potentially into worst when it's also a process-centric answer. Now, the other things, couple things to be aware of as we talk about the exam questions, patterns that you might notice. As a clue toward the best answer, watch for the words pause and acknowledge together. Sometimes you'll see pause by itself. Sometimes you'll see acknowledge by itself. They could be a clue, but there'll be times when you see options for pause that are not the best answer. But pause and acknowledge together give an energy of awareness and partnership. They could be the clue. Look for repetitious words and phrases. Now, this does occur in sample questions 1, 3, and 4, where 3 of the answers will start with the same words. So let's say, for example, ask, acknowledge. Whenever that pattern does appear, and I know that pattern appears on the test, I didn't know the significance behind it when I took the test. It took me about 2 weeks later for it to lock in. The outlier, the one that is worded differently, is always one of the 2 answers. And it's pretty easy to tell which one. Drag and drop it, and now you're choosing the remaining answer from these 3. So look for that. Sometimes it's not just the opening word. Sometimes it might be a phrase at the start. This pattern appears in the Solutions Academy test as well. So it's there. Be aware of the outlier is always one of the 2.
Yeah.
And then selecting. Then we go to watch for the energy or the idea of partnership in the answers, because we are partners with our clients. That might be a clue toward the best answer. Anytime that we can engage and give the client autonomy and we are there with them, that's a key clue. Look for phrases such as the coach shares without attachment. Maybe the coach is picking up on something that they're not quite sure is there yet in what the client is presenting. We don't want to assume that that is the case, but it's coming up because we're there. Maybe our intuition's kicking in. Ask to share the perception, and then share it without attachment, because that is part of core competency number 2 of embodying a coaching mindset. It's just something I'm picking up. Doesn't mean it's actual for the client. For patterns toward the worst answer, be aware of words like suggest, tell, praise, direct, anything that would be the coach leading or stepping out of coach role. That's going to be all stuff that we don't do. That could be a clue toward the worst answer. We already talked about it. Check your opinions and biases and view through the lens of the core competency of the code of ethics. So as was talked about earlier, when I noticed my replies to the worst answer were personal objections for me of, I would not want to be told it's none of my business. And I wouldn't want to do that to someone else. But while we said before, rude isn't necessarily the best thing to do, and it's not advised, it's not against an ethical code. So be aware that while you might not enjoy it, or it might not be the way that you would prefer it done, it's not necessarily unethical. So view the worst answers through the code of ethics. And then particularly when taking the Solutions Academy exam, pay attention to the idea of ignoring something the client presents. Sometimes it is the worst thing to do. Other times it isn't, particularly if there are other answers that approach the coach moving forward with the facilitation of the session from a place of assumption, that there's something else lingering there, or they think they know the answer, they think they know what's going on, and they just continue going in a little bit of a blind spot. Then ignoring whatever the client is presenting may not be the true worst answer. Other times it might be. So just really read into the energy there. It's probably going to be down here in this field of worst, but it might not be the absolute worst.
One of the things I do remember when hearing these notes again is the word transactional. Anytime you feel like you have a transactional coaching session with a client, I kind of tended that towards the lower, whether it's the worst or it's just a bad answer in general. So that can at least eliminate 50% of your questions when you see something that's very transactional. With that mentioned, the type of questions that we see on the ICF were a lot in the corporate setting. So if you are a wealth or a health coach or a spiritual coach, know that this is going to be very difficult and tough for you because you're trying to read in a mindset in a corporate setting. Whereas I was able to take this while I was still working in a corporate setting as well.
And the thing there, I think, because that is an important, it threw me how I was surprised at how many questions there were that were based in that. What might be helpful here for those who aren't familiar is to go back to something we talked about earlier. Anytime a sponsor relationship or an external person is introduced, really lean into the idea that this question is going to be about an ethical question of maintaining confidentiality and not breaking the contract.
Yeah.
Because that's the only time, I think the only time the word sponsor is mentioned in the core comps is core comp 1. It might get mentioned in core comp 3 as part of contract setting, but the heavy energy of it, the full presence of it is in core comp 1 about maintaining confidentiality and setting agreements.
I think I remember this question correctly, is you're coaching a client and you also are coaching one of their supervisors. I remember that question, but the thing is, you can't breach that contract. You can't tell them who you're coaching either. So those were things that just stood out. I was like, okay, this seems is pretty bad, and I lean towards it. When you're giving away client information or you're sharing to another person, that tends to be my worst answer when I saw it there.
Yeah, and so as a general tendency, what's going to lean toward the best answer is either tell them, remind them of the contract that is in place. I can't share. I'm happy to see if we can all get together to have a meeting and have a conversation together, or just remind them of the contract that's in place, or I can't divulge anything. I'm sorry.
With these new coaches about to take these the ICF tests, any other things? You brought up a lot of great points about like look at those keywords, look at different patterns of the different questions. It's not always 100%, but you're going to use your judgment to kind of get the worst answers grouped up over here and get your best answers grouped up over here. Was there anything else that could help us determine what are the the best answers and the worst answers, Dan?
Not that I have on top of my head right now, just the patterns that I've noticed over time in when I used to teach it, and now that I've been working even more with some new tools that have come
Yeah.
into my awareness, like the Solutions Academy
Yeah.
sample exam, that opened up a lot for me. In now I get a sense of, while you don't know what you missed in the ICF exam, at least this sample test gave me a lens to look back and think, yeah, there was something similar in the ICF exam and I answered it with a similar answer. That's probably one that I got wrong.
I have to really thank that Solutions Academy test because it reminded me of how to take a test again, go through the rhythm and motions. If you take it once, I don't think that's enough. You take it again. My score eventually made its way to the 100%, but I was trying to not retake the test in terms of memorization. I look at it, okay, I got it wrong. Why did I get it wrong? I memorized more of the why I got it wrong than the correct answer. So that way, when I take it again, it helped me out going into the ICF test. Granted, that Solutions Academy test, the questions are so short. I wish ICF test was like, yeah, the 2 sentences right there, but it'll help you. It'll help you, and you have to go through it too.
The other thing there is on so many of the questions in Solutions Academy, when you're done and you get your results back, on many of the questions, if you get an answer wrong, they do tell you why the preferred answer is the preferred answer. It doesn't happen on all of the questions, but on many of them, and lean into that, like which core comp is in play in this one, so that when you see a similar scenario in the ICF exam, you might have a sense of, oh, I'm looking at core comp 4 on this one rather than I'm looking for code of ethics or something else.
I remember looking at those answers, and when they give you the correct answer, I think there was like 1 or 2. I'm like, why is this consistently the wrong answer? And every time I took that Solutions Academy test like maybe 10 to 15 times. So whoever's from the Solutions Academy, you probably see my name 15 times. They see my score go up. But I always wondered, for some questions when I consistently got it wrong, I don't know if it was, I was just trying to figure it out, and I would go back and look at those acronyms again and say, okay, do any of these acronyms hit as a trap, as an ACCAT from Lyssa Hart's video, or an EMATS PLAG as well for the 8 ethics, code of ethics?
It is a challenging exam.
Yeah.
There's no 2 ways about it. Just know that it is a challenging exam. Personally, I think what makes it challenging is that they've added the worst scenario, because it's not something we tend to think about doing. We tend to think about what's the best way to proceed, and putting this lens on something of what would you not want to do is a pretty of a harsh mind shift. I don't think about doing things wrong. And when I do, I think about them from a lens of personal preference, not from a lens of a core comp or a code of ethic. So just be aware of that. And we've said it already in this video a couple of times, you may have to check yourself back out of personal preference and into what's the worst case based on the material I've studied.
I remember you mentioning, because you went from PCC to MCC. You had to take this test, and the original time when you took it, it was the regular comprehensive exam, multiple choice, normal. I went straight past up ACC into PCC, but I still remembered speaking with you to use the Cadence as an ACC to go into this test, because I think it was more challenging for you because you have this wide bank of ways to coach an individual in this, right?
I know it. Yes, I know what you mean now. That as we think about the progression up the ICF food chain of credentialing, ACC and the expectations there are that you'll facilitate the problem. It's a bit more of a transactional session. The coach who has 100 or so hours, they're going for their first credential. They're building experience. As you come up to PCC, now the session becomes a bit of a hybrid of the problem is the first thing addressed, and then we look for the dive into the who or the person. So client comes in with their situation that they want to talk about, and the coach as they're listening for opening places to dive a little bit deeper into, exploring emotion or maybe beliefs that come up that might be blocking the client from achieving, or even that would, maybe they want to set up a plan to do something, and then they start in the conversation, start to realize, I'm not even sure that I want to do it. Ask about that, because that's how doesn't matter if they have a plan if they don't want to do it. So we might have a renegotiate of the contract, going from the problem to the person. A little bit more gray comes in there. At MCC level, the expectation is you're coaching the person the entire time, and the coach is in their intuition, almost like an observer, a fly on the wall, observing the totality of the conversation, both how they're showing up and the client. So a lot more gray comes in, because it's very situational. Every person is going to be different. And as we think about the more transactional approach, where life is a little bit more black and white here, it's a little more clear cut, versus we get a little more into the gray of, one situation I might say one thing to a client, a different situation I might handle it differently because it's a different person. I think when you're only presented with 4 options in an exam, I truly had a hard time picking the worst option, because like I could make a case for any of them.
Yeah.
And even the first time I saw the 8 sample questions, I was like, I can make a case for any of these. It took me a while of working through them, but like understanding the ideas behind them. So for those going in, I hate to say it this way, but like dumb it down just a little bit. Get into a little bit more of a black or white, that there, at least in terms of the answers, there is one that's right for each situation. There's one that's right for the best and one that's right for the wrong, and stick in that, versus I could make a case for any one of them. That did not serve me. I still passed barely, but it didn't serve me.
Simplifying in the middle of a test was probably one of the toughest parts. I remember going through some of those questions and I was like, wait, I would not be doing this. I could be doing this. But then I always kept on, I kept on telling myself, nope, this transactional. I'm gonna pick this one. I'm gonna stick to my guns, and I didn't look back at it, because it's going to happen when you're in the test. You're like, what is the most transactional? What's not being transparent? What's the what happens when there's like bad ethics happening within the coaching questions? You have to stick with it, because some other answers might sound a little better. And going back into the ACC mindset was really a tough thing for me to do, because that's after 500 hours of coaching. It was just easy to get caught into it.
Very
the questions, yeah.
Very, because we, as we evolve up in our journey and our listening skills and our presence changes, to drop back into an exam that is your answer is either right or wrong. It's a binary option. It's either going to check the box or it's not. Can be a little tricky.
Before we close out and everything, just want to throw in a couple new other resources as well. As I was going through this journey, again, I was always remembering to celebrate myself. You've gone through all the hard work. This is just another part of the journey, and it's the finish line of it all. But it does not dictate whether or not if you're a good or bad coach. You just have to go through the credentialing exam just to finalize it all. I was blessed to be able to meet individuals like yourself, find ways to seek out coaches who have taken this test, especially those who just newly take the test, because they'll be able to share maybe some questions that are fresh in their mind. For me, it was about 2 months since I've taken it, so let alone you took it like a year ago, so I don't know how many questions you'll remember, but it'll help you learn and build that cadence. Any advice to anyone that you want to share about networking and connecting with individuals?
Yes, definitely search out those. I'm always happy if someone wants to reach out to me like you did. I'm happy to spend some time and chat it through and get them in that mindset of success and preparation. And the other thing that I'm reminded of is something that you shared. You got to a point where you're like, I don't know that I can absorb any more information. For everybody watching this, know when you've reached that point, that you're essentially, your cloth of absorption is saturated and nothing else is going to stick and retain. There will There will always be something that you do not know.
Yeah.
You can prepare as much as possible. There will be something you do not know, and just accept that. You go in knowing what you know. You'll pass, or I won't even throw the other option out there. You will eventually pass.
You
But
will.
be kind with yourself there. If the other happens, if the other result happens, how would same thing we say with our, how would you approach it differently now, knowing what you know? It's not, do not beat yourself up here that I screwed it up, I didn't pass. It's a difficult test. If your score does not match the lowest passing score, which I like beat by that much, I got to keep saying that because it's
Yeah.
important. I got to bring that humility. The test
Yeah.
is tough. Be kind to yourself, and certainly be with the emotion. Don't stay there. Feel it, express it, whatever you need, and then move beyond it of how are you going to prepare for the next one so you kick its butt.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I was thinking, oh, I'm going to over prepare for this. I'm going to keep studying for this. Again, I moved it from the original date to an extra week up, because if I was sat there for another week, I think I would have spiraled out of control. And that was the awareness I built for myself. I remember reaching out to my mentor coach and I said, hey, do you have any advice? I was just trying to keep preparing some more. And I remember the email that she responded back like that. You got this. You good. Like, you got this. You've done it already. And I was like, I could use some help. I could use some resources, but yeah, but it was one of those things. I'm like, you know what? She was right. I got this. She knew that I would be an over preparer, and I would get to where I am today.
And look at you.
Yeah.
There you are.
Yeah, there you
PCC.
go. PCC and MCC. There you go. And we're looking forward to a lot of great things. Again, leave any items in the comments if you have any questions. We'd be glad to answer them for you. And Dan, if you want to share how individuals can get connected to you.
Yeah, reach out to me through email, daniel@transcendentliving.com. Find my website, Transcendent Living, under the services tab. Under the ICF mentoring, there is a resource for decoding the exam questions that will be there as a PDF download for you to be able to read. It's about a 17-page document that breaks down each of the sample questions and why the two selected answers are the preferred answers and why the other two aren't, to help you work through it.
Yeah, wonderful. And you can also reach out to me at DatNguyenLLC.com, and I'll put those links here on the screen and in the descriptions for us to be able to view it here. Dan, thank you so much for sharing your wonderful experiences here for everyone. This is going to be one of many videos that individuals look up how to take the ICF test. A handful of them are out there on YouTube. We can only hope that this builds up more and more information for future coaches out there as well.
And I want to thank you, Dat, for one, reaching out a few months ago and opening the conversation of, can I pick your brain? And
thank you for that.
Yeah,
thank you.
The wonderful friendship and connection that has come. And then this was your idea. So this video, I really want to say thank you for bringing it forward, for us to be able to serve those who are following behind us in their journeys. Because I know for me, and I sense for you as well, it's about giving back and continuing to up-level this industry.
Absolutely. I have to thank the ICF for making such a hard test where I get to reach out to you and maintain this level of friendship throughout this past year. Like, it's been great. And I met so many other wonderful people as well going through their journey. And who knows, leave it in the comments and share about the individuals that you've met going through this process, because there's people in your class who have taken this test, people within your program, your cohorts. All that information's there. It's about us helping each other out. And I think that's something that I value so much.
Yeah. And the other idea there that just pops up is, we've mentioned a number of resources that exist at the moment that we know of that exist in the moment. There are those resources that we don't know. And from the time we record this, there may be new resources available that you, the viewers, notice or want to share. Please add those to the comments as well. Let's turn this into a thought place for sharing ideas and new resources as well.
Absolutely. Hey, and next time we'll probably make this video. I'm gonna keep adding more faces into this video to get their experiences and try to remember our experiences as well. Because I think the next time I'll have to take this test again, it'll be for an MCC many years down the line. But we'll worry about that when that time comes.
I have therapists I can refer you out to for that.
Thank you. I'm going to need it. It was a pleasure, and this was very fun. Thank you so much, and hope everyone enjoyed this video.
Yeah. Thank you all. See ya.
Thank you.